All right, let's get started. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the third annual Student with Purpose Conference. My name is Aaron. I'm in the seventh grade. I was your host last year, but Nima will be this year. We would like to know who's in the house. Could everyone please start by typing their grade and or position in the chat? Want to say welcome everyone again, but before we get started, we would like to take a moment of silence in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for all of his sacrifices and time he put into changing this world. So a moment of silence would be great. All right, at this time, I'll pass it over to Nima.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nima, and I'm a sixth grader at Harriet Tubman Middle School and a leader with Student with Purpose. Welcome to the third annual Student with Purpose Conference powered by the Teaching with Purpose, Inc. Student with Purpose is a platform to activate student voice and students in a way to change the educational system and to give us decision-making power, like our theme last year. The theme of this year's conference is Economics times Education equals Empowerment. Student with Purpose engages and empowers students with civic education to influence change in the educational system. Student with Purpose engages and empowers students to influence change in the educational system by advocating at the federal, state, and local and classroom levels. Student with Purpose is a place where we make the decisions. We curate ideas and plans of what we want our future to be. The school district's budget is at least $13,000 a year to serve me. I've been in school for about 7 years, meaning I'm worth $91,000. I understand that programs, including schools, get paid based on my participation and can benefit from my success to get more donors, which is why schools make attendance a priority. But here with Student with Purpose, we get paid to learn and to lead. We are empowered to have a voice and to create our own future. Again, we don't want to just be a number that you can count saying I was part of your program. Here at Student with Purpose, we learn economics and entrepreneurship. At this time, I would like to ask you guys a few questions about what I just talked about. In the chat, what changes would you guys like to see in the educational system? How can you influence that change? And how would you want your voice heard? everyone could look in the chat and see the questions. What changes would you guys like to see in the educational system? How can you influence that change? And how would you want your voice heard? I'd just like to ask, can everyone see the chat? Are they able to type? There's a lot of great ones in here. I give a shout out to Janice Dance, More Economic Equity for Public Schools, and Selena K. I would like to see more effort put into educating students. Yeah. From Renee Mitchell, I see she says, more opportunities for Black youth to lead, imagine, and determine their own futures absent of racism. From Deborah Coakley, I would like to see educators respected more and paid more for shaping America's future leaders. I can influence that change by teaching leaders and motivating change in those students who don't believe in their worth. My actions and words can lead that student to hope in themselves. I want my character to speak my truth in words. Andre Miller, I am an advocate for youth voices, and that is how I help influence change by amplifying youth voices. From Michelle DePass, I'd like to see more cultural, appropriate educational resources and curriculum. Very true. From Laura Axon, changing the systems of accountability and assessment. Now we're going to move on to our speakers. So we're going to start off with Renee Mitchell. Dr. Renee Mitchell is an award-winning writer and published author, multimedia artist, social justice advocate, and teacher/facilitator. Renee's more than 25 years of journalism experience has groomed her exceptional communication, analytical, and grant writing skills that have helped invest more than $2 million into community-based programming. Yet Renee is also a community-grounded visionary, often gifting her talents as a poet, playwright, performer, and self-taught graphic designer. Renee has written numerous poems, plays, songs, and books about healing from trauma. Her deepest desire is to help others use their creativity to let go, gather up, and move on. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Renee Mitchell.
Am I unmuted? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Nima, for your leadership. I'm so happy to be here. I am here today to talk about mindfulness. And so often when people are requested to do this type of activity in school, it becomes another thing to kind of appease leadership. But mindfulness is also a way to get rid of your physical pain, help you feel better. It reduces depression and anxiety. It helps you feel more in control of your life. And so it's the kind of thing that you could do through sitting, walking, martial arts, visualizing, thinking about the ocean, for example, or something else that kind of like calms your nerves. And because it works so well, it feels like it's become a gimmick instead of an actual practice that makes young people want to try this on their own and not just something that they might do in school. I'm wondering how in these moments that we can start to really grasp the importance of something like mindfulness within our youth. And the reason I talk about this issue with young people is not only because I know it works, and it does, but because I need Black youth to survive. Because one day you all will be the backbone to our community. And when I became a teacher, I really started to deeply understand that the things that I had experienced in the classroom and the behavior from my teachers that wounded my soul and made me feel like I was unworthy, that I didn't belong, that I wasn't cared about, that those things were still happening in the classroom decades later. And so that's why I decided to pursue my doctorate degree at the University of Oregon to figure out how to address this issue of teachers intentionally undermining Black students in schools. And what became very clear to me is that as Black adults, we haven't really always been telling youth the full truth. And according to the research that I did for my dissertation, I came to understand that Black youth, like you all, are the most traumatized group within a whole population of people. And they're deeply traumatized because of racism. And one thing we don't tell our youth often enough is that racism is likely never going to go away. Based on the research that I've done, it's what this country was founded on. And back in 1859, the Supreme Court of the United States issued this decision called the Dred Scott ruling. And Dred Scott was a Black man who was living freely during times of enslavement, but he was captured by slave catchers, which was an early version of what we now know as police officers. And the Dred Scott decision from the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, said that Black people, and this is a quote, had for more than a century been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations, and insofar inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his own benefit. This opinion was at that time fixed and universal in the civilized portion of the white race. And so now, 163 years later, even though there was a Supreme Court justice who said that Dred Scott decision was one of the most regretful opinions that the Supreme Court had ever made. But the low opinions that some white people have of Black people haven't changed that much. And so in the study that was done in 2020, it showed that both Black and white people are, and this is another quote, less likely now than in the past to think that civil rights have improved, end quote. So not only that, is that the trauma that began when this country was founded still continues to fester. So that is one of the big reasons why I teach mindfulness, so that we can start to understand how to grasp our own healing within the Black community, and particularly amongst Black youth. Because when we hear or see about on social media the deaths of Black people by the hands of white people, we have this collective shared memory of that trauma because of our ancestral belief in this phrase called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu was heavily promoted by Desmond Tutu, who recently passed on. And it means I am because you are. And because you are, therefore I am. And Ubuntu is an African principle that still applies to Black people in the United States today, because it makes us socially different from white people who tend to think individualistically instead of collectively. So what happens is when we encounter racism, and especially anti-Black racism, it causes nightmares and heightened suspicion. Everybody's out to get me. It causes hypervigilance, so that you have to keep looking around, waiting for something to happen negatively. And so even Black people who are famous, wealthy, or accomplished, like Oprah Winfrey or President Obama or even Snoop Dogg, they still experience some anxiety and stress from racism. And you might think that it's like, oh, it's no big deal, like I'm not letting it affect me, but it is affecting each one of us. And we're actually internalizing what's happening to us and to others in our community. And it allows for this sense of feeling of rejection and abandonment and low self-esteem. So it is also very, very disruptive to our community. We see it in gentrification, divorce, abandonment, poverty, abuse, especially when we aren't addressing these issues, we internalize them. So they get into our mindsets, and we end up replicating this kind of behavior in our own community. So it leads a lot to dehumanization. So when you have trauma that is not healed, that is not acknowledged, that is not mourned, then it becomes much more internalized, and it could lead to just really feeling badly about yourself, really feeling angry, and not even necessarily knowing why. And so the reason why I'm talking about, I should set that up, is to talk about the importance of mindfulness and how each of us needs to adopt this kind of thinking and actions, because there's an African proverb that says you could tell the health of any community by how it answers this question. The question is, and how are the children? How are the children? And in Black communities all over this country, the resounding answer is not well, because of the racism that our children are experiencing, and because Black youth are the most traumatized of all adolescent groups. And it's something that we need to be aware of, because what's happening in our schools is perpetuating the racism that we're experiencing in our community. We are policed as Black children in school for the way we talk, the way we wear our hair, the clothes that we wear, the way that we interact with other Black children. There's this bias within schools in America, and it's a major contributor to the school to prison pipeline. And so 25 years ago, James Baldwin, who is an author, he said, the brutal truth is that the bulk of white people in America never had any interest in educating Black people, except as what could serve white purposes. And so often when we bring up issues of racism, particularly anti-Black racism, we get confronted back with, oh, I didn't know about that, or I don't understand that, or I don't remember that, or I don't believe that, or I'm not convinced by your argument that the racism still exists. And so the cycle continues, and the racism never heals. And traumatized Black children who recognize the signs of injustice start to interpret it as a sign of their own unworthiness. This is something that happened to me. I'm actually writing a book about how schools made me feel so unworthy. And then we grow up, we get married, and we have children, and we perpetuate this same internalized racial injustice upon our own children. So it becomes this cycle that never ends. And so I'm saying all of this because Black children in particular need to be taught and need to learn how to take charge of their own healing process. Because we cannot wait for white teachers, for white police officers, white judges, and white people in general to heal ourselves from the racism that they have created and still engage in. So as Black children, we need to learn how to heal ourselves for our own sake, for our own mental freedom, and for the sake of the children that we will have in the future who need our protection from racism. And so mindfulness is a proven way to try to deal with this internalized feelings of unworthiness. Mindfulness helps us manage our emotions. It helps us calm our anxiety, and it could even ease bouts of depression and thoughts of suicide. It helps you it makes you feel more relaxed and more creative. And you could practice mindfulness through exercise, deep breathing, through movement, dancing, taking a walk in nature, even coloring and drawing. That's because when you shift your focus from your trauma or the negative emotions that you're having, you learn to gain more awareness about your thoughts and your feelings. So you could look at them like as an observer, and you could process them without having to really react to them or internalize them. So for example, when you practice mindfulness, and when you encounter a teacher, for example, who is engaging in a microaggression in the classroom, like trying to say something to you or do something that makes you feel bad, when you practice mindfulness, you can respond without having to respond in anger by detaching yourself from someone else's expression of smallness, and then learning how to recognize what are your own thoughts about these issues? What are emotions are coming up in moment to moment? And a mindfulness helps you kind of separate the thing that's happening from the way that you're feeling about it. So for example, sometimes when we think about unworthiness, we have this thought that I'm a bad person. And in mindfulness, you kind of step away from what's happening, and instead of I'm a bad person, that I'm having a thought that someone's trying to make me feel like I'm a bad person. So you stop internalizing the shame about what someone else is doing. So you see the difference between that? And there's a lot of different ways to do it. So one way is through an exercise that's called the body scan that I'm going to do with you right now. And this is where we take our attention and we sweep it all over our body from head to toe, focusing on any feelings or sensations that come up when we're doing this, but not to be critical of any feelings that you might have, staying completely non-judgmental. So this centering piece that I want to do with you, I want you to really be mindful while we are doing this. And so I'm going to put on a little bit of music in the background, okay, as we're doing this practice. So for the adults in the room, this is something that was adapted from the Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. Her book is called Radical Dharma. And those who are working at the intersection of healing and teaching and learning and social justice may be interested in that book, Radical Dharma. So here we go. First, I want you to recognize that you are in your seat, and I really want you to root down in your seat. Root down through the bones and let your weight be held by the chair. And then to the best of your ability, I want you to make sure that your feet are planted on the ground beneath you, right? So maybe this means not allowing yourself to lean back in your chair, but be upright and connected and rooted. And so then we're going to actually extend what we're thinking about and what we're feeling from the top of our head, which is what we call our crown, toward the sky. And in doing so, when we think about coming up and our crown going up into the sky, we feel our full length and the dignity that is inherent in each one of us. And inherent means we don't have to earn it, and it cannot be taken away from us. It is our choice. And so as we extend ourselves into the earth and into the sky above us, into the earth beneath us, we feel a sense of integrity. We feel dignity. So we have dignity above and integrity below, like a root of a tree. And we find our full length, that which is ours, just by virtue of being alive and connected to life. And then we find our full width. And so maybe let's take our shoulders up to our ears and drop them back down again. Again, take our shoulders up to our ears and drop them back down again. And so we feel the breath in our chest, in the span of our shoulders, and in our heart. And this is our width. And in our width, we find our sense of relationship. First, the breath of our own being, and then the space all around us. And as we feel into the space around us, we extend our field of attention to the air all around us. And so it makes us feel more spacious, makes us feel like we are even more than what we thought we were. And then more and more, just as it feels comfortable to you, feel yourself extending out into the walls, extending to the ceiling, extending past the floor. And when we do this mindfulness, this work, our work, on behalf of the generation that is now and that is coming, in this, we are aware of the front body. This is what faces us. Our belly, our chest, our face. We can envision looking way into the horizon and seeing our own children, our children's children, the generations who will live and love and grapple with the legacies of who we are and what the work that we've done to build community, and by the decisions that we make. See, we do this work, even as young people. We do this work for the children yet unborn. And of course, our work is only possible because of the generations that have come before us, our ancestors, both related by blood and those who we feel another kind of kinship with. So let's be aware now of our body in the back, our back body, and feel the support of our ancestors in our back body. All of those who have come before us, who are known and unknown, recognized and unrecognized, proud, and even difficult. We always feel that support at our back. And all that is meaningful, only if we choose to take up this space in between, this space of mindfulness right here and right now, so that we could take our place between the future generations and the past. And we feel that presence in our depth. And finally, the most important thing, and for what many of us find to be the most difficult, is to allow the center of our gravity to drop down out of our heads and into our bellies, and to feel what matters most to us right there in our core, in our belly, not in our head, not in some vague sense of out there somewhere, but to really allow what matters to us, to you, to be held in the core of our bellies. So your energy let it drop down. Let it fire the action that you take in this world that keeps us moving. And whenever we forget why we're here, whenever we feel like we're lost, I want to remind you to come back to what matters. Come back to what moves you. Come back to being grounded again and again and again. Take a deep breath. Hold it. Let it go and drop your shoulders. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is to give you a tool when you're feeling a little stressed, when you're feeling like something isn't right, something isn't happening the way that it should be, that you'll always have this tool to be able to go back to. So I run this program called I Am More, Making Ourselves Resilient Every Day. And we're going to be offering mindfulness in our new space, the corner of Killingsworth and Albina, what we call in the Black community the original Albina art space. We're going to be offering opportunities to participate in mindfulness in that space. We're also going to be setting up sewing machines to teach Black youth how to make quilts, which is part of our ancestral heritage. Because sometimes in the act of creativity, that can also be a form of mindfulness because it keeps us focused on what we're doing instead of the things that are running in our heads. So we'll also have camera equipment to teach youth how to tell their own stories, which is also a form of revolution and a form of mindfulness. And we do this because, not because it's work to do, but because it's part of our love and investment into the Black youth and into our generations that have yet to come. Because if we don't get to a point of really investing in our own healing, how are our children going to understand the depth of their own brilliance and resiliency? So my deepest hope, and that of I Am More, that is rooted within our ancestors' imaginations, is that Black children will one day not have to worry about racism, that they'll be able to accomplish everything that they want to dream about, but they'll also be able to thrive, to feel passionate about what they do and how they look and how they act. They'll be able to believe in themselves and not be satisfied with the crumbs of injustice that racism offers. And so this is the debt that I owe to you as Black youth, to carry in your hearts the memory of freedom. And so there was a writer that I came across in doing my research for my dissertation, and this is his quote. "We came from the cotton fields. We came through hard times, and we look back and see what all of these people before us have done. They brought us here. And to say thank you is not enough." So my goal is to help Black youth be grounded in their own brilliance, their own creativity, their own resiliency, and to be able to get to those places through mindfulness, through intention. It is what we deserve. It is what you deserve, to feel like you belong, to feel healthy and healed and whole. So I encourage you to continue to practice mindfulness. And another version that you could also do at school is this thing called tapping. And I teach this to young people because you could do it all over your face, on your shoulders, on the back of your hand, whenever you're feeling stressed, to tap a part of your body. And what it does is releases tension, and it's another form of mindfulness. So there's all different kinds of forms. And I also can encourage you to get to know us and stop by the I Am More, what we call a refuge space outside of domination, where Black youth are loved and healed and celebrated, to learn a little bit more about this thing we call mindfulness. So thank you for having me. That is the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions if we have time, but I'll leave that up to you to let me know what you would like me to do.
Thank you for that amazing speech. In the chat, how can you guys use your mindfulness in your everyday life? If you guys could type that in the chat. And just so everyone can like see what you guys write, change your thing to make it for everyone to see and not just the panelists and the host.
About one of the parts of the speech. My question was, how can we apply mindfulness in our everyday school life?
Well, I would say apply mindfulness in school, at home, in the community. And there are ways to do it so it's not as obvious around people, especially if you're needing to feel that immediately. And one of the ways is what I had mentioned to you, with the tapping. There is also another way that I teach young people is to take your thumb and just hold it, like really put some pressure on it and hold it. And what happens is sometimes energy gets stuck in our body, especially negative energy. And by holding our thumb, it helps release that energy to let it flow throughout our bodies so it doesn't get stuck. So I would say anytime that you're feeling stress, or even if you're just feeling tired, to adapt some kind of mindfulness activity, whether it's holding your thumb or tapping or giving yourself what we call affirmations. I am strong, I am capable, I am brilliant, I am resilient. Things that you say after I am, because that is a powerful way for you as a young person to determine who you are and what kind of impact you want to make in the world by saying I am, and then putting that word in there. I am brilliant. I am capable. I am smart. I am determined. So these are the ways that you could practice mindfulness. Again, mindfulness is just being very aware of what's happening, how you're feeling, what you're thinking, what's happening in your body, the emotions that might be coming up. That's really all mindfulness is being aware of what's happening to you and how you could take some of these strategies that I've given you to be able to calm yourself without having to use adults to be able to tell you how to do it. You are capable of being able to come up with your own strategies on how you can become more calm and present and feeling loved and capable.
Thank you. I think that's great because there's a lot of students that that don't practice mindfulness. So I think that if they would if they would self-reflect on themselves, they would be much more calm and less stressed. So thank you.
I agree with you. Thank you, Erin.
Okay, we're gonna move on to our next speaker, which I believe is Mr. Paul Coakley. If he's in the house, I think he's in here somewhere. Yes, he is. Okay. So our next speaker is Mr. Paul Coakley. He began his school administrator career in 2008 as the principal of Hudson Park Elementary School in the Rainier School District, located in Rainier, Oregon. After 6 years as a principal, he became Rainier's assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction. In 2014, Dr. Coakley was hired by Centennial School District as assistant superintendent, human resources director. He then served as superintendent of Centennial from 2016 to 2021. Before becoming a school administrator, Dr. Coakley taught in Portland Public Schools and in Champaign, Illinois. A frequent presenter at state and national conferences on a variety of education topics, Dr. Coakley is a professor at Portland State University in the Initial Administrative Licensure Program for School Administrators. So I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Coakley.
Thank you for having me. Can you please turn on the host capabilities? So I could share my screen and then you'll be able to see my slides.
Are you able to share your screen now? You should be able to unmute now.
Okay. Yeah, just give me 1 second. All right. Are you guys able to see my slides?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulty and welcome and thank you for joining me. And I wanted to say thank you to Students with Purpose Conference and Karanja Cruz for giving me the opportunity to speak today and share with you a little bit about myself and my job, as well as what it means to leave a legacy as an educator. So like you said, I am Dr. Paul Coakley. I am a Black man. I am a father. I'm a son. I'm a mentor. I'm a coach. I'm an educator. I'm a college professor. I'm a writer, and I'm a superintendent. And in Oregon, I am one of 197 superintendents. And of that, I am the only Black male superintendent in Oregon. And it has been that way for the past 6 years. I moved from Tennessee to Oregon when I was 5 years old. My parents are both educators, and they were being recruited from Tennessee because there was a lack of diversity for educators in Oregon. And today, there is still a lack of diversity for educators in Oregon, although that is something that every district hopefully is working toward. I know that my district is working towards that, and districts across Multnomah County and the rest of the state. And so I just wanted to point that out before I move on. All right, so today we want to take some time to honor Dr. King and his legacy of hope that he left for all of us through his words and his actions. He was a leader who inspired us by being driven by a deeper purpose. He understood what his why was. And what I mean by his why is, I mean his reason for waking up each and every day to fight for justice. His purpose wasn't monetary, meaning it wasn't about money. It was deeper than that. It wasn't materialistic. It wasn't about things. It was deeper than that. He was driven by a servant leadership rooted in beliefs and self-reflection and intention and conversations and overcoming fears and doubts. And so I want to share some stories with you today. But before I do that, I want us to take a look at this quote by Dr. King, which is, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And as we honor Dr. King during these challenging times, during a pandemic where over the past 2 years, we've dealt with a lot of trauma based on the pandemic. And we're lucky because we've all made it here to 2022, but a lot of people didn't make it with us. And so what are we doing for others in a virtual setting where we're not able to really interact like we normally do? What are we doing for others? So this is a short session. So I want each person to focus on 3 agreements in this session. And those agreements are to stay engaged through listening, to be okay with experiencing discomfort, and also to accept and expect non-closure. You're probably not going to be able to get all your questions asked because we have a brief amount of time, but I will speak my truth, and I hope to share stories with you that make you personally reflect on your own stories and your own experiences. And then I also want to highlight a couple of people who really impacted me in my K-12 journey. And I want to give those people their flowers. I want to give them their props. I want to show them their love. I want to let them know how their legacy impacted me as an educator. And then I want us all to leave with purpose. I want us to leave with something intentional that we're going to do based on somebody who you benefited from based on their legacy. So you may not be familiar with the compass on the left, but that's the Courageous Conversations compass. And I'm not here to promote courageous conversations, but I do think that it is a good tool for reflecting, for thinking, and for sharing. And I also think it's good into getting into deeper conversations and more difficult conversations about race and about other issues, barriers, conflicts, and problems. And so there's really no right or wrong way to engage with the compass. You just do it based on how you feel. So I have a couple of questions for each of you, and hopefully the students that are on here have a way to take notes. The first question is, think about your first experience dealing with race. And I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that and then jot it down. And then I want you to take a look at the compass. There's moral, there's intellectual, there's emotional, and there's relational. Where does your first experience dealing with race put you on the compass? Then I want you to write that down. Then the second question is, are you driven by a deeper purpose? And if so, why? And what is it? I want you to think about that. And then I want you to jot that down. And I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. And then as you think about your deeper purpose, I want you to look at the Courageous Conversations compass. And I want you to find where that story for you puts you on the compass. Then I want you to write it down.
Everybody can put their answers in the chat.
All right, I could see some people's responses in the chat. Thank you for doing that. So based on this first question, I want to share a story about my first experience dealing with race. And I mentioned that I'm from Tennessee. I'm from a small town called Gallatin. It's right outside of Nashville, about 30 minutes. And I moved to Oregon when I was 5. But when I was in Tennessee, as a little kid, race wasn't something that came to my mind. I just wanted to play. And the community that I lived in was mostly Black. And there was a lot of my relatives there, neighbors, African-American, kids, everyone I came in contact with. And basically, I did what any 1 to 5-year-old would do. Play, have fun, spend time with your parents, learn, grow. Then I moved to Troutdale based on my parents being hired as educators from Tennessee to Oregon to help diversify the workforce. And they both also left their legacy as well. But when I got here as a 5-year-old, I started school, kindergarten. And as a kindergartner, that first week of kindergarten was a little bit different than my experience as a 4-year-old in Tennessee and as a 3-year-old in Tennessee, hanging around with relatives and cousins and neighbors that looked like me, because I was the only Black student in my classroom. And I probably would have never noticed if it wasn't for the questions that I was being asked. I was being asked questions like, why is your skin darker? Why is your hair curly? Why does it stick out? Why is it round? Why doesn't it lay down? Can I touch your hair? Why is it so different? And those questions highlighted the fact that I was different from the other students. And it made me wonder and think about things like, is it wrong to have darker skin? Is it wrong to have curly hair? Is it something to be ashamed of? So I went home and I talked to my parents about my experience that first week in kindergarten. And what I found out was Black is beautiful. And I found out that Black hair is also beautiful. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's actually something to be proud of. And when I think about that story, and I look at the Courageous Conversations compass, it puts me like this on the compass. It puts me in the moral and believing quadrant, and it also puts me in the relational acting quadrant. It puts me in the moral and believing quadrant because it makes me think about educators and students when they come into classrooms, what their first experience is, and how do we make that first experience a positive experience? And if they feel different, how do we educate students in the classroom to accept those differences and support those differences and love those differences? Because difference is a good thing. And it also puts me in the relational quadrant because it makes me want to share that story with others, because your initial interaction in a school setting could set the trajectory for your K-12 experience. Mine happened to be positive for the most part, but I think it was positive, not so much because the classroom culture was there that made it positive. It was more positive because I had a support system of people who made it positive. They were able to answer my questions. They were able to help me through my different times that I didn't feel like I was connected to a certain classroom or school setting. So then the next question is, are you driven by a deeper purpose? And if so, why? And what is it? So I want to share what mine is. As a superintendent, my purpose is to support school districts, principals, schools, teachers, so they can support students, and to look at a school district system and to remove barriers to make it somewhere, a place where everyone can succeed. My deeper purpose is really about students. But before I was an educator, when I was a student in K-12, I had a different purpose. And I want to share that story with you. So let's move from kindergarten, and we're going to fast forward. We're going to jump. We're going to skip over to my junior year in high school. My junior year in high school, I was in honors English. Honors English is if you're taking AP courses, college prep classes in high school, honors English is what would be equivalent to that. So you have to take a test to get into honors English, and you also had to take prerequisite classes. So I was in honors English when I was a freshman. And I was also in honors English when I was a sophomore. And I enjoyed being in honors English because I like to write. I'm a writer and I like to read. And I also got to know the students in that honors English class, and it was basically tracked. It was the same kids every single year. So my freshman year in honors English was the same kids that I was with my sophomore year in honors English. They weren't kids that I hung out with, but when we were in the honors English class, we got along fine. We helped each other, and I was looking forward to seeing them my junior year on my first day of school because I hadn't seen them all summer because they weren't really kids I hung out with, but I knew them from honors English. So my first day of my junior year, as I'm going to classes, the bell rings and I'm in the hall walking through to my honors English class. And when I got to honors English, I saw kids that were in my class last year going in to have a seat. So I went to do the same, but I was stopped at the door by the teacher. And she said, "Hey, I think you're in the wrong class." And I said, "No, I'm pretty sure I'm where I'm supposed to be." And she said, "No, I don't think you're in this class. You're not on my list." And I said, "I'm pretty sure I am on your list. I'm Paul Coakley. Take a look. I'm pretty sure my name's on there." And she looked down the class list and my name was there. And her face, it shifted from asking questions to disappointment. Her face dropped and she said, "Oh, Paul, you are in this class. Go ahead, have a seat." And I can tell by the way that she said, "You're in this class, have a seat." She didn't want me there. And she didn't believe that I belonged there. And so that stopped my smile, my interaction, my looking forward to seeing the students that I hadn't seen from the summer before. And it shifted to a feeling of unwant. But I went into the class and I had a seat. I had a seat way, way in the back. And I slunk down in my chair and I reached into my backpack and I grabbed my headphones and I put them on my ears and I turned up A Tribe Called Quest. And I listened to Tribe until the bell rang. And I couldn't wait for the bell to ring because I just wanted to get out of there. And when I got home, I talked to my family about my experience. And through that conversation with my parents, what I realized was, who cares if she didn't want me there? I didn't need her stamp of approval. I belonged there because I had proved that I earned it through taking the test and making the score that I needed to be in honors English with. I also proved it through my freshman work and my sophomore work. And my purpose, my junior year, became proving her wrong. It became showing her, I don't care what you think about me because you can't put a ceiling on me. You can't stop me from reaching my goals. You can't stop me from being who I am. You can't stop me from doing anything because you don't control me. That was my purpose. And I want to say to the students who are on this call, on this Zoom, that I believe in you. And I'm sure that there are people out there, educators who have believe in you and will continue to believe in you. And when you hit barriers, there's going to be certain people that bring you up and help you through those barriers. And there's also going to be people that don't believe in you, but you don't need their stamp of approval. Be you, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't do anything. Don't let them tell you you can't achieve your goals, because you can. And when I think about that story, and I look at the Courageous Conversations compass, it puts me here, opposite on the spectrum of the Courageous Conversations compass. It puts me in the feeling and emotional quadrant, because that story brings out something in me that brings up negative emotions and it brings up positive emotions. I'm glad that I made it through that. I'm glad that I stood up. I'm glad that I didn't drop out of honors English or quit or give up. But I could have, and I have friends with similar stories who did. And so for educators on the call, I want people to understand and know that as educators, we can impact students in a positive way, or we can impact students in a negative way. But as educators, we should believe in all students and do their best to impact them in a positive way, regardless of their race, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of what they look like, regardless of our beliefs, regardless of if they're outside our norms. And it also puts me in the intellectual and thinking quadrant. It makes me think about students and what they're going through right now, this year and last year and the year before that. There's been a lot of changes. We've been virtual. We've been hybrid. We've been in person. We've been masked. We've been vaccinated. We've been virtualized. We've been social distanced. Everybody's dealing with that, those traumas, but they're also students dealing with barriers because of the color of their skin, because of what they look like, because of where they live, because of who their parents are. We should take off the zip codes driving our beliefs about who lives in that neighborhood and this is what they're capable of, who lives here and this is what they're capable of, this is their background, this is what they're capable of. Take those barriers off. Kids are kids, educators are educators, and we're here to support them. So what is leaving a legacy? Leaving a legacy as an educator, to me, is educators empowering and believing in students. It's about removing structural, institutional, and racial barriers. It's about serving, supporting, and mentoring future educators and future leaders so that we are moving the next generation of learners forward to their next level of success. And so for students and anybody on here that is taking notes, I'm going to give you 5 things that you can do to leave your own legacy, regardless of if you're in education or you're going into some other field or you're a community member or you're in the business world. Here's 5 things, tips for leaving a legacy. First, understand your purpose. Remember your why, because that's the key to you giving your best every day. Don't underestimate your influence. You are more important to the people you serve than you think you are. So don't underestimate your influence. Third, relationships are essential in building a culture of learning and growing. Number 4, and this is a really important one, courageous decisions inspire some and disappoint others. As a leader, you're not going to please everyone. So be okay with that. Make courageous decisions because they inspire some and they disappoint others. But we're probably not making that decision to inspire or disappoint. We're doing it for a deeper reason. We're doing it because it needs to be done. And number 5 is you've never arrived. So keep learning and keep growing. So this is a snapshot of my K-12 journey. I'm not going to go into all the details about which thing happened at which time, but it's a timeline if you take a look at it, all the way from kindergarten through 5th grade, all the way up to university, and then when I got hired. And it even shows these last 2 years of pandemic and where we are today and my current job today. But what I do want to share with you about this timeline is that the low points that you see in green, pink, and red were barriers or microaggressions or pitfalls that I faced throughout my K-12 journey. And I faced way more than that, but those were the ones that really stood out to me. And then behind those, in blue, are the high points. They're the milestones. They're the successes. They are making it through whatever barrier was posed and getting to that next step. And so for educators and students, I'm sure that if you did a timeline with your personal journey, you'd see a similar kind of data. You would see low points and high points. But what I want to point out is not really that, yes, I made it through all these milestones and I'm still here. What I want to point out is this: every single milestone that I did reach, there was a barrier before that. But there was also a person that doesn't show up on this graph that helped me move through that barrier. Sure, I try to push through them myself, but I also had somebody each time that I can remember who actually helped me. When we think about Dr. King's quote, "What are you doing for others?" There was somebody, I didn't ask them for help. They just did it. They just did it. They helped me get through those barriers so I can reach my next level of success. And so today, I really want to highlight 2 people who helped me get through my K-12 experience. But before I do that, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's helped me through my K-12 journey and my educational journey. There's way too many people to name. For one, my parents. They were both educators. My mother's a retired teacher from Portland Public Schools. She worked at Vernon Elementary. She taught kindergarten and pre-K. She probably also taught first, second, but I really remember her teaching kindergarten and pre-K. And she motivated me when I got my teaching license to be a good teacher. She still motivates me today, even though she's retired. We talk all the time, and I just want to highlight her as an educator. Thank you, Mom. Also, my dad, Paul Coakley Sr., was a principal. Many of you know him. For the students on the call, he was principal of Harriet Tubman Middle School. And I think the student leaders here today are from Harriet Tubman. So that's kind of cool. And then also, he taught at Gresham High School he was a principal at Gresham High School, and he was a principal at Roosevelt High School. And unfortunately, he passed away this past July, 2021. But this summer, so many people came out and they reached out to my family and they told us stories about the legacy he left and what it meant to them. So I just wanted to say thank you to my dad. I know he's probably looking down and he's excited that I had this opportunity to speak to you. So I just wanted to highlight that he was a principal at Tubman. For many of you, might have been your parents' principal. For some people, he may have been your principal. And I just wanted to share that. But for the two people that I really want to highlight today, there are two people who are educators who are now retired that influenced me, encouraged me, and motivated me to strive for success. And so the first one, his name is Mr. Hudson, Coach Ron Hudson. He was a middle school teacher. He's a PE teacher. He taught at Gordon Russell Middle School, where I attended. And there wasn't a lot of diversity at Gordon Russell, but also what I would say about Gresham School District is through my K-12 experience, Ron Hudson was the only Black male teacher that I ever had. And he was there for me. He may not even know what his level of influence is, but he was there for me at a time when it was one of my toughest times. And the reason it was one of my toughest times is because it was middle school. And to all the middle school students on here, I just want to say, I know middle school can be tough. And there's probably, hopefully, an educator that you connect with each and every day that helps you and supports you. And so let me tell you a little bit about Coach Ron Hudson. He not only connected with me every day, sometimes I would try to hide from him, but he would seek me out and he would hold me accountable and he would ask me questions. And he was always upbeat and positive, and I could relate to him. And he was funny and he was loud and he was boisterous and he stood out amongst all the staff. And he didn't change who he was. He was the same inside the building as he was outside the building. He lived in my neighborhood and he used to see me every single day. And Mr. Hudson was Mr. Hudson. Ron was Ron. He was a Black man in a district where there was not much diversity, but he was unapologetically himself. And that made me be unapologetically myself. I didn't have to change who I was. I didn't have to put on a facade. I didn't have to change my culture. I brought it with me everywhere I went. And I want to say thank you to Mr. Ron Hudson. Next, the second educator that I really want to highlight is Principal Joe Malone. Principal Joe Malone was the principal of Martin Luther King Elementary School in Portland Public Schools. He was also the principal at Ockley Green. And I know he worked at George Middle School probably before he was at King. And I don't know every single place he worked, but for people who know Joe Malone in Portland, he was also principal at Grant. And what I want to say about Mr. Malone is he left a legacy of high expectations. He was consistent in my life. He always checked in on me. He still checks in on me. He's retired and he's moved back to Tennessee, and every now and then I get a call and he says, "Hey, Dr. Coakley, just checking to see how you're doing." But also, he was a sharp dresser. He carried himself with a little bit of swag. He was cool. And he was a Black leader. And he was a little bit quiet too and funny, and he could joke and smile and build relationships in a real easy way, but also he had a silent authority that he carried himself with that was well respected in the community. And he really took an interest in me being successful. When I was in school, he would always ask me about my grades, and he'd ask me about my personal interests. But he would always check on me and say, "Hey, doing all right? Anything I could do to help?" He did the same thing in college. And then when he found out that I was in the teacher program, he stayed in contact with me even more. And then when I graduated, I was really excited that I graduated with my teaching license from Portland State. I stayed in one more year, and I got my master's, and I came out. And then he called me. He was one of the first people to call me, not just to congratulate me, but he said, "Hey, we have these 2 jobs that are about to open up. Put your name in, because I think that you would do a good job here. And he gave me my first opportunity to be a teacher. And he hired me at Martin Luther King Elementary to teach second grade. And he's just been a friend who's always been there. My dad passed, him and his family was here. They flew out from Tennessee to attend, support us during our time of need. And I just want to say, thank you so much, Principal Joe Malone and Coach Ron Hudson. I'm forever grateful. And for anybody, I don't know if they're on this call or on the Zoom, and they may not be, but if you are in contact with them, please share that I shared this story, and hopefully it's being recorded, and maybe I could share a video with them. Lastly, before we open it up for questions, I want us to think about, how do we leave this conference with purpose? For one, I have two questions for you. Who is your Coach Hudson? Who is your Principal Malone? Life is short. And if we have an opportunity to give somebody their flowers that has impacted you in a positive way, one way that you can leave with purpose is by being intentional about letting that person know what their impact has been on you in your life and what it meant to you, the legacy that they left. So think about those people, write their names down. What does it mean during the pandemic? Maybe you can't go visit them and take them out to eat, but you can pick up the phone. You can send them a text message. You can hold a virtual meeting, or you can mask up and go see them. But I want us to all be intentional about leaving with purpose and sharing your flowers with somebody whose legacy has impacted you in a positive way. The last thing that I'll say before I open it up for questions, because we are in a pandemic and this is a virtual conference. And I remember when Karanja's conferences were in person and they were at Park Rose, and I was there too. And those were great. And those are ones where you can actually go around and you're talking to people and you're getting to see how people are feeling and what workshop they're planning to attend and whatever. But we had to pivot, and this is the way that we can safely connect. And with that, I want to say that my brother, Brian, he is a doctor in New York at Mount Sinai. And I've been talking to him a lot about the pandemic. And I would be losing points with him if I didn't say this. Don't fear the vaccine, fear the virus. Don't fear the vaccine, fear the virus. We got to get out of this. I'm sick of losing people, especially people of color. The data is disparaging. It's disparaging across the board. But I also want to say mask up and keep yourself safe. I'm wearing an N95 so I can stay alive. You should do the same. Please take care of yourselves. Appreciate it. I appreciate being a part of this conference, and I'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
I have a question for you. So, do you feel like you have left a legacy so far in your career? And if so, how?
Thank you. I would say, I don't know if I have, because I hope I have. I hope that in Centennial and also my work in Rainier, Oregon as a principal, and in Portland Public, there's things that I've done that have impacted people in a positive way and influenced them to reach and achieve their goals. And I have mentored people, but I don't know until I retire and people and see if it continues or people share stories. I hope so, though. Thank you.
If anyone else has questions for Dr. Coakley, you can put them in the chat. few people in the chat are saying you've definitely left a legacy.
Oh, thank you.
It looks like Koishi Owens has a question for you in the chat.
Yeah, I see that question, and it's about the ongoing um, diminished return on children outcomes, maybe. And what I would say is that's something that we need to continue to work on each and every day. One way that we can do that is through setting clear goals and expectations, but also hiring the right people. I think hiring in education is important. You got to get the right people on the bus and in the right seat so they can benefit each and every student, and ones that students can connect with, that believe in students and care for them deeply. And so I think getting the right educators on board, and I think we have a really strong team across the county. I'm blessed to be able to work across the county, and I see a lot of improvements, but I also see that we have a long way to go. And one of the goals of leaving a legacy is that we have never reached where we need to be. We need to keep going. We need to keep learning. We need to keep striving, and we need to keep making ourselves better and giving our best each and every day.
There's another question from Rakaya Adams.
Okay, that's a good question. So she said, if you were not an educator, what would you do for work? So I would be a writer, and I actually am a writer. I've published 2 articles on equity, but also I'm currently writing a memoir about my K-12 experience. And it starts with, before my K-12, it starts with the desegregation of schools in Gallatin, Tennessee. And I was able to talk to some of my relatives and interview them, and really read about desegregation and try to write about their experience of when the schools desegregated. And then it goes to my family moving to Oregon, and then my own personal story. So I would love to publish that book in the future. And hopefully, if I retire, I would like to be an author.
Looks like another question from Selena. What's your opinion on educators and teachers that don't actually know how to teach properly?
That's a good question. So one thing that I say to everybody is everyone needs a coach. And so if there are educators out there that aren't educating students properly, it could be for many reasons, but hopefully they are coachable. I would say if they're not coachable, then they're in the wrong profession, and we need them not to be there. But if they're coachable, everybody can benefit from a coach and they can get better. And my favorite basketball player of all time is Michael Jordan. And even Michael Jordan had a coach. It was Phil Knight. And without Phil, Michael wouldn't have been who he was. He would have been awesome still because he was just athletic and he was amazing. But Phil got him to those championships. They did it together. And so nobody should be so big that they think they can't benefit from a coach. And also, I have a coach myself as a superintendent, somebody that I talk to on a regular basis and ask questions. And when I'm struggling, they help me get through situations. So that's my answer.
I think there's one more question in the chat.
So one more question in the chat is that there are virtual Black schools that are amazing. And can we create something like that? I think that just depending on possibility, we can create anything that we want. I had the opportunity to open a virtual school when I was a principal in Rainier. It takes funding, and it also takes at least a few really strong teachers who are able to connect with students virtually in multiple ways. But I think that it is possible. And also there's probably models out there that we can learn from.
Thank you for that. I think we're going to move on to Rakaya Adams. If
Great.
you can stop presenting now. Please.
All right, I'll stop sharing my screen, and thank you so much. It might take, the host might have to, oh, I see it. Still not used to all the Zoom.
So next up, we have Rakaya Adams. Rakaya Adams is a chief investment officer at Meyer Memorial Trust. Before joining Meyer, she was a director of investment management at The Standard. Rakaya started her career as a mergers and acquisitions lawyer at Skadden, Arps, Slate, Maghair, and Flom in San Francisco. She also serves as chair of the Oregon Investment Council, the board that manages approximately $90 billion for the Oregon Public Employees Retirement Fund. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Adams. If you'd like to.
Hey, Ms. Nima. So I'd actually like us to have a conversation. The first question I have is, can you guys give me authority to share my screen? So Ms. Nima, during the conversation, I want you to chime in and interrupt me if there are questions that show up in the chat. I'd rather have a conversation than to talk for a long period of time, okay?
Okay.
And I won't call you articulate because you're more than articulate. You are just phenomenal. So thank you for being such a wonderful host to us today. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the albino page?
Yes.
Wonderful. I want to fill in a little bit of detail about me that I realized we sent over my professional bio, but there's a little bit of homegirl information you all need to know. I went to King Elementary School. I grew up in Northeast Portland. I went to Harriet Tubman Middle School when Dr. Coakley's father was the principal of the school, and he was a very important person for me. So Dr. Coakley, please know that your father touched a lot of people, including little knuckleheads like me who were at Tubman at the time. My family has been in Portland for a long time. We have 7 generations that have been here, and I'm in the 4th generation of Portlanders, so we've been here for a really long time. But I grew up in Northeast Portland. When I left for college, I stayed away for 23 years. And I thought when I left Portland, my thought was I'm never coming back to this town, because a lot of the aggressions that prior speakers have talked about and some of the pain and trauma that we've all had to navigate really made me feel like I needed to run somewhere else and be somewhere else, and to be honest, to be someone else. But it took me 23 years to come to terms with that. I want to talk to you about some work that I'm doing as a result of that, and how each of you have featured very prominently in my life. It's fitting that we are having this conversation today on MLK Day, because it is both his work and your lives that are really the animating force in my life right now. Before I jump in, though, I want to thank Karanja and the Teaching with Purpose team. I know how hard it is to put together these kinds of programs for young people, so I really appreciate all of the work you've done. And to the other esteemed speakers, it's been a real gift to listen to you on this day of reflection. And everything that you've said just really inspired me. Dr. Mitchell, the point of, and how are the children, and taking charge of our healing process is some of the work that we're doing. And then listening to Dr. Coakley, that point of that not everybody's going to like what you're doing if you're speaking truth. That is so true, and I feel it deeply with the work that we're doing in Albina Vision. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes and share some pictures with you on and off so that you can see what we're doing for your future. And I want to engage you. I want to hear your thoughts. If you have questions, please type them into the chat. Nima has agreed to interrupt me and not wait till the end with questions so that we can have a conversation. To be specific about where I grew up in a neighborhood that was called Walnut Park when I was a kid, and it's near the intersection of MLK and Killingsworth. It was mostly black and brown, but not all. And when I went to Harriet Tubman Middle School, I would guess that 60 or 70% of the students there were Black or African American, and we were the dominant group, and that was true at King too. So I lived in a little Black village, and you couldn't have told me at that time that I wasn't beautiful. You could not have told me I wasn't powerful. So it's interesting to be in an age, in an age of Black kids who grew up in Portland, where we actually had a village of folks around us pouring love into us, who would see us on the street and check in and make sure we were going to school and doing well. But coming back 23 years after I graduated from high school, I saw some things that really broke my heart, and it broke my heart for young people in particular. What I saw was that our community was displaced, that because of intentional policies and some bigger picture issues, our neighborhoods had been gentrified, and that people lost their homes, and they had built churches and schools and communities that they could no longer afford to live in. And something just didn't sit right with me on that. The other thing that didn't sit right with me is that there were a lot of people like me who had gone on to do quite well personally, who weren't speaking up when we saw that this was a problem for the larger population. In fact, some of those folks were sitting on boards and commissions that were doing some of the more horrible things to our community, including the Development Commission and some of the other organizations in town. By the way, if I'm using euphemisms here or I'm saying words you don't understand, please type into the chat, and I'm happy to use plain English. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is the built environment. Dr. Mitchell talked about your emotional health and navigating being a young person. Dr. Coakley talked about the classroom. I see young people and I think about how they navigate the city. Where is the school that you attend located? Is it located next to a freeway? When you leave the school, can you cross the street safely? Can you afford to live in a neighborhood where you can walk to school? Is your school named after you? Are the streets named after people who are your heroes and who contributed to the community? So just think of the Albina Vision team's role as building the environment around you to make you feel safe and strong and loved. That's the work that we're up to. So I want to start with some images to help you, to place you in the history of Black and brown people in Portland so that you know what we looked like. Hold on one second. This image that's on the screen is a picture taken from the West Hills in Portland, looking east into Portland. And if you look at the bridge that's in the center of the screen, that's the Steel Bridge. And this is the Broadway Bridge, and the Harriet Tubman School is right in here. At this time, this is taken in the 1940s, the African-American population in Portland largely lived in this part of the city. Some folks lived on the west side, but people lived in here, but a lot of folks lived in here. This is around the time of the Vanport floods, and this is where the African-American population was living. And you'll notice it looked just like any other part of the city. There were houses there, there's school buildings there. But the city decided to acquire that part of the city. It was called Lower Albina. And they used a process of taking land called eminent domain. And they bulldozed the houses and the schools and the community centers and the parks in that community. And this is what it looked like after they bulldozed it. This is the neighborhood that would go on to become where the Memorial Coliseum is, but I'll show you pictures of that later. But before I get there, I want you to see what the people who lived in that community looked like. And I included an image of a child in the top center to give you a sense of what life was like in the historically Black part of Portland in the 1940s and 50s. You see that boy on the street with his bicycle. And then the stores in the top right, that was a barber shop. If any of you know Donna Maxey, that's her family's barber shop there in the top right corner. And then in Northeast Portland in Lower Albina, it was the jazz district of the city. So there were musicians who were playing in Portland and all kinds of people coming from around the world to listen to them. A grocery store at the bottom left to give you a sense of what grocery stores look like, not the Fred Meyer you know today, but a corner store. And then on the bottom right, a church like one that we all attend or that we see in North and Northeast Portland, these churches were foundational, like cornerstones for our community. So this is what a child around your age would have seen in Portland, the kind of experiences they would have had. They would have gone into the store at the bottom to get a candy, or to the church in the bottom right to go to Sunday school on Sunday mornings, or maybe they get their hair cut at Maxie's barber shop on a Saturday afternoon. But this is what life was like until the land was acquired by eminent domain. So this is a time-lapsed series of pictures, meaning it's meant to help you see how the city changed over time. The top left is an early picture. That bridge, by the way, is the Broadway Bridge, is an early picture of the beginning of the demolition of the historically Black community. The top middle, we expanded Interstate Avenue, and that's where the Moda Center is today, to give you a sense of that. And we started taking more land. The top right image you've already seen, that's when they acquired most of the homes from African Americans. We estimate that the taking of land in order to clear that site at the top right was worth $500 million. Some Black homeowners got $50 for their homes. So this is a massive taking of wealth for our community. If you go down to the bottom left corner, that is what it looked like after they cleaned up the site. They had to do some things to it to improve it, but you notice there's still some houses down by the river. So people are still living there. The bottom center is what the Memorial Coliseum is today. You've probably been inside of that building. So you'll see that we bulldozed the homes of Black veterans to build a monument to white veterans. Look at the building and all that parking around the building where there used to be homes. The bottom right image is an image of the I-5 freeway as it comes through Lower Albina, and those overpasses you see there are still there today. And we are continuing to argue and fight and negotiate about I-5 and its relationship with Tubman to this day, which is an interesting point to the children. That tells you how you were connected to people who were kids in the neighborhood in the 1940s and 50s. I want to slow down before I move on to see if there are any questions. Nima, are there any questions in the chat?
Not that I see, just people talking about what happened to them.
Oh, okay. And Nima, do you have any questions?
Not so far.
Not yet. Okay, I'll move on. This is an aerial view, meaning from the sky, of downtown Portland and Lower Albina, which was the historic Black part of town. The river that you see is the Willamette River that you cross all the time when you cross a bridge. You'll see that really big building on the bottom right. That's the convention center. The building that looks like a turtle shell, that's the Moda Center. The big square building right in the center of the picture, that's the Memorial Coliseum. And then in the upper left, that giant building up there, that's the Portland Public Schools headquarters building. So you'll see that we bulldozed the homes of Black folks to build these giant buildings, and we virtually eliminated all of the residential homes that were built in that neighborhood. And now we have streets, parking lots, and giant buildings in the places where African Americans used to live. Now, for most people, they would throw up their hands and give up. But a group of us came together about 7 years ago to learn about this history and to begin to envision a future for Lower Albina. I was very forceful in that conversation along with some other people to make sure that the history, the Black history of Portland, did not get eliminated. And if this community was rebuilt or rejuvenated, that it should be done with a view of bringing African Americans back to the neighborhood that we built. So that's the work we've been up to in Albina Vision. And we're doing this work. It'll probably take us 20 or 30 years. We're doing this work for you guys. By the time it comes to fruition and the buildings go up and the parks are in place, I'll be almost too old to enjoy it. But this is what this is how love plays out in the built environment. I'm doing the work for you guys because I love you and I'm committed to you. And I'm doing that because Dr. Coakley's father and the people from that generation built an environment for me to grow up strong and confident and assertive. And they sent me out in the world to learn. They poured into me. So I'm pouring into you the same way that those folks poured into me. Look at this image. I want to highlight a few things that are important to your generation that were not as important to other generations. You see how the river pinches in between those two bridges? Well, we filled it in. That's not the normal flow of the river. We filled it in so that we could build things on the west side and on the east side of the river. We built railroad tracks. We built these big buildings, but that's not the natural flow of the river. So in addition to not taking very good care of each other, we didn't take very good care of the environment. We polluted the river during the 1920s and 30s, and now we're trying to clean it up. So one thing I've learned in doing this work and trying to express love to you in the Built Forum is that the way that we treat the environment is the way that we treat each other. So I think it's exciting that you are in a generation of young people who are beginning to challenge us about climate change and how that's interrelated with racial equality. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second to answer any questions that are out there, and then I'll jump ahead so you can see some of the images for what we hope the albina community will look like when you're young adults. Nima, any questions there?
I had a question. How can we get our reparations back from like what happened?
That's a really good question. You know, it's funny, some people think about reparations only as financial, meaning that you get money for bad treatment. The Albina Vision team actually believes that reparations can come in the form of the built environment, meaning how you live, right? So there's the financial component of reparations, which we absolutely need to get. There's the institutional form of reparation that you can receive wealth in the classroom by having, studying your people, having teachers who look like you, who protect your emotional health. And then there's a kind of reparation that comes from just how you live your life, where you live your life, whether it's safe, whether you feel supported by the policing system, whether the street names reflect your heroes, whether you feel like this is a place that you can call home and afford. Those are all forms of reparation too, Nima. And so while some people are fighting for financial reparations, some people are fighting for educational reparation, I am fighting for urban reparation for you. I want you to have the kind of environment that makes you feel safe and makes you feel like you can contribute to society. Okay, Nima, did I answer your question, dear?
Yes, thank you. It looks like there is another questions. It says, how can we help to ensure there are, what can the youth do to get involved?
Yeah, oh gosh. So my very first presentation on the Albina Vision work was to a group of students at Harriet Tubman Middle School. I think I told you guys, I went to Harriet Tubman. So my very first presentation was to the students. I would love it if young people would start to speak up, not just about the freeway, but about the ways that you navigate the city. Here's an example, Nina. After I spoke with the Tubman students, they asked me to do a tour of Lower Albina at the height of an average sixth grader. I don't know how tall you are, Nila, but it's about 4 feet tall, right? Between 4 and 5 feet tall. So when I walked through that neighborhood over those overpasses on the freeway, trying to navigate from the Tubman School to Lloyd Center, what I discovered was, oh my gosh, those street corners are really treacherous for you guys. you couldn't see around corners. Some trucks were, the grill of the trucks were at the height of your head, right? And thinking about where you walk to take the city bus to go home or to navigate the city, what I did was learn that we need kids' voices to push us to design around the life of the child in the city. I want you to feel safe standing on a street corner waiting to cross the street. I want you to be able to navigate the land in Lower Albina from Harriet Tubman down to the Moda Center over to the Lloyd District without feeling like you're in danger. So one thing I would say is that we will engage young people, especially the Tubman students, in the discussion about Lower Albina, but we want to hear what your opinions are. So speak up. So I'm happy to be a vessel to push forward some of the student voices, but you guys know what you need to be safe. You know what you need to be loved, and I'm here to listen to you. You're very important to me. So Nima, I want to show you what some of the images of what the community would look like if we designed around the life of a child, okay? So this is an image of what a patio could look like just outside of the Moda Center. So this would take back that land if you've taken the bus down to the Moda Center where the transit center is. This is right near there, right by the river. And right now you can't really get to the river because it's grimy and we haven't invested the money in the east side of the river. But if we did invest it, it would look a lot like this. Let me show you another image of what we think it could look like. So you'll see in this image, the Memorial Coliseum is on the right, and the steel bridge is still there. It's that orange bridge. It's hard to imagine that the land between the front of the Memorial Coliseum and the river is that much, is that big. It is that big. We put the people in there to give you a sense of scale. So this is what we could do for you guys on the east side of the city. Going a little lower, this would be the view of the Moda Center from Broadway. So this would be kind of like walking from Tubman to the Moda Center. Imagine if you could walk through this instead of through the treacherous street covers and freeway holes that make the transition a little scary right now. And you'll notice that we have Black children at play in the center of town. There is no place in the center of town right now where we encourage Black children to demonstrate joy and to play and feel safe. We want you to have space for that. You'll notice in this image also, we have different kinds of people, Black women with different textures of hair. We're making a point that Black people will be in the city for the next 100 years. We're not going anywhere, that this city belongs to us as well. So there are lots of really important images here, but more than anything, we're trying to demonstrate what Portland could be if we made space to design around the life of a child. Here's another more detailed image. This neighborhood would have to be very dense, meaning there wouldn't be single family houses, that we'd likely have apartment buildings in it. And this is what those apartment buildings could look like. You'll notice bikeways, interesting parks and trees and greenery to make the communities where you all live less hot, because a lot of neighborhoods where working folks live in Portland don't have enough tree coverage to keep them cool in the summer. And as the climate changes, we need more trees. So this is an image of what that might look like. And here is an aerial image demonstrating what the community could look like. And remember, this was the historic Black community in Portland. This is what our community could look like if we committed to designing around the life of children. Some people will call the work we're doing education. Some people will call it placemaking. Some people will call it urban design. Some of us will recognize it as reparation. Some will say, I'm asking for too much and I'm going too far, but this in my mind is what love looks like in the urban form. Dr. Coakley's father loved me and I love you. This is the work that we have to do to reflect you in the city. Now, I said at the beginning of my comments that there was a Dr. King quote that connected me to all of you. And that quote is, I've decided to stick with love because hate is too great a burden to bear. When I came home 23 years ago and I saw our community displaced and gentrified, I felt deep rage. I felt pain. I felt anger, but I'm trying to translate those feelings into something constructive, and that something constructive is loving you, even though I don't know you, um, and finding ways to help you be successful, not just in the 6th grade, but when you come back as Dr. Nima and you're ready to run this town, we'll be ready to receive you. So that's the gist of my comments, and I'm happy to have question and answer.
I have a question, and it looks like another person in the chat had the same question, but like, how could students get involved because I know there are a lot of kids at my school who would like to speak up, but a lot of us don't really know how.
Yeah, Nima, you're making me think maybe we need a kids council. So right now we have a group of we have a leadership council of elders who advise us and help us navigate some of the politics of this work. As you can imagine, what we're saying is controversial. But what do you think of the idea of a kids council, Nima?
That would be nice, and it would be a good way for students to be able to get their voices heard and have more of an input and opinions on what's going on around us.
I really like that, Nima. And I'll tell you one other challenge that we have here. And I hope that I'm not insulting you guys. I'm talking to you like you're an adult, like you're adults. Okay. So I know this is a lot, but when I was at Tubman, it was mostly Black and nobody cared whether the air quality that we were breathing was good. Nobody cared. We played out in that playground and inhaled air from 1970s Cadillacs. It was crazy. And one of the challenges we have now is as the school has become more diverse, there are more questions about the air quality surrounding the school. And so I really need to hear young voices like yours to stiffen my spine, to strengthen my resolve to keep fighting for this, because some folks are saying the only reason why people care about Tubman and air quality now and the redevelopment of the neighborhood is because the school is not all Black anymore. I don't agree with that. I think the air, we should care about the air you breathe, Nima, even if when I was a kid, nobody cared about the quality of the air I was breathing, right? I don't want to forsake your health because I'm hurt because of the way we were treated. Does that make sense, Nima? So I'm trying to like work through that.
Well, one of my classes I had PE, and there was one day we were gonna go outside and play kickball, and our teacher didn't let us go out because of the air. And now what you're saying is making me think, like, if she said no, we can't go outside because because there was mostly white kids in my class, and I was the only Black kid in my class. So I wonder, like, if we were all like my skin color, if she would still let us go outside.
I think it's, that's something we're all wrestling with. And I think a bigger question would be, would she be your teacher, right? And so at all. And so the thing I want for you, Nima, is that you deserve the best, period. And if the best means that childless middle-aged ladies like me go out into the world and fight for your space, I'm going to fight for your space. And you should have clean, healthy air. And I know I'm doing this because I love you, but I know in about 20 years, you're going to love me back, right? Because when these buildings are up and we need people to run city government and we need people to be surgeons and doctors and superintendents, you're going to be the ones doing that. So the expression of love is to older people and to younger people, to care for them. Anyway, so that's a long-winded way of saying, I'm glad that you didn't go out and inhale air that was unhealthy for you. And I never want that choice to hinge on whether or not you're Black or whether or not your teacher is Black. I want it to be because you are an American and an American child that we will protect and love, period.
Do you think Tubman should move?
Not to the King School. So that was ridiculous. That was absolute trash. I don't know what else to say about it, but I do think I would like the students who go to Tubman to have the best technology and the best physical building in the district. There's plenty of other options of land and places to build a new building for conversation. I have some ideas of what those alternatives are. So I'd like Tubman to stay in Lower Albina. I don't want us moved out of that community. You can see how valuable it will be. But I don't support the prospect of moving Tubman to the King Elementary School. That is absolutely ridiculous. Is that too harsh, Nima? I don't know.
No, it's
And what elementary school did you go to, Nima?
Boise Elliott.
Boise Elliott, okay. Any other questions?
Not for me. I don't see any in the chat. So
Okay, I feel like I'm over time. How are we doing on time?
good. Someone said, why do we have to choose? But that was like 12 minutes ago.
Yeah, I think that was the same point. We don't want to have to choose. And the way though, Nima, that we create an environment that you, when you're an adult, won't have to choose is by building power and by owning our community, exercising authority over where our schools are and what's adjacent to our schools and who's teaching in our schools. So what we're trying to do now is to build on what previous generations did for us, so that by the time your family or your children come around, we don't have to choose. That maybe the best schools, best school buildings, and best school curriculum in the entire PPS system would be schools where Black children go. And we're capable of doing that. And I'm going to fight for you.
There's another question. It says, what is the air quality of that community?
I think they mean the Lower Albina. So one of the challenges, I don't know the specific air quality measurements, but I'm happy to dig up articles about air quality adjacent to Tubman that are available in the public domain when Commissioner Hardesty is speaking. But what we know is that the parts of Lower Albina that are adjacent to the freeway have poor air quality. But there are parts of Lower Albina that are not adjacent to the freeway, and air quality there is as good as other parts of the city. I'm going to share my screen one more time, Nima, just to illustrate one thing here to answer this question. You'll note in this image, the Albina Vision team envisioned a large cap over the freeway. So this is I-5 as it comes through Lower Albina. We think over time that freeway is going to get capped, and some of the adverse impacts of air quality will be filtered out eventually. So we know that over time, this neighborhood will change radically. But the parts of the neighborhood that are not directly adjacent to the freeway have air quality, I think, on par with the rest of the city.
What was my question? It just slipped my mind.
Well, there was one more question about where the best air quality is. So I think the best air quality would be in the parts of the city that don't have major highways and also have adequate tree coverage. So it's a combination of not having carbon pollution in the air, and then also having enough trees and greenery to absorb some of the toxins in the air and to keep the space cool. So my guess would be parts of the west side of the city.
I would like to follow up about the council, and like, when and how do you think we can start recruiting kids to be on the council?
Ooh, I like that, Nima. I like that you're making this happen. I would like to take this idea back to the Albina Vision Board and present the possibility to the kids. I'd like to make another offer to you, Nima. We're doing this work for you. And so if the kids at Tubman would like us to come and do this presentation again and to talk about how a kids council might work, I will do that. So you tell me when and where to be, and I will be there, period.
Okay, I'll keep in contact with you.
Okay. That's all I got, kiddo.
There's one more question. I think two more questions. It says, would it be possible for Tubman to stay?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can see a number of ways we could keep Tubman in its current location. I don't know if people know that Tubman is the original, that building is the original Elliott building. It it was there before the freeway. The freeway came after the school was there. So the school has been there longer and should be more important to the community. So I can envision a way that the Tubman School could stay there. We have deep history with that school. Nima, I played kickball in that field. We had school dances there. Good in the Hood happens in the park that's adjacent to the school. So there just are deep connections to it. So I do think there are ways that we could make the school work. I mean, the easiest way would be not to change the freeway. But there are a number of things that could happen that the school could stay where it is.
There's one more question. What did you do before you decided to do this?
Well, that's a really good question. When I was at Tubman, you guys probably don't know this TV show, but there was a show called The Cosby Show. And that was, when I was a kid, one of the few shows about a Black family that was successful. And on that show, the mom was a lawyer. And when I was a kid, I wanted to be a lawyer in order to not be poor. I grew up in public housing, and my mom was a single mom hustling to make ends meet. And I never had the privilege of just, a middle class or upper middle class family. And my father wasn't around. And so I just felt like I needed to choose a job that would help me have a beautiful life, like they did on the Cosby Show. So I was a lawyer for a long time and decided after 10 years of that I wanted to become an investor, because the investors control the agenda. And I wanted to move from being someone who was personally successful to someone who was successful enough to transform a community. And that required a change. And Dr. Coakley, who was just on, and he's a little younger than me, but we were kicking around Tubman around the same time.
I think that was our last question.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Nima, for your time. I appreciate you asking questions and engaging me, and I look forward to seeing you on a kids council.
Thank you. I want to be a lawyer as well. Just wanted to tell you that.
Okay, we got to talk about that.
Okay. We're going to move on to our next person. Just a second. So our last speaker, but definitely not least, is Joanne A. Hardesty. Commissioner Hardesty is an American Democratic politician in the U.S. state of Oregon who is currently a Portland City Commissioner, having taken office on the Portland City Council in January 2019. She previously served in the Oregon House of Representatives from 1995 until 2001. So I'll hand it over to Commissioner Hardesty.
Well, first, thank you so much, Nima, for your excellent facilitation of this program today. And I want to thank Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Coakley, and my sister from another mother, Rakaya Adams. When I first saw the length of the program, I was like, oh, this is going to be a long day. It has certainly not been a long day, not by a stretch. This has been the most motivational day I've had in some time. So thank you for inviting me and for having such a phenomenal program. I know your questions to me were really all around reparations, but if it's okay, I'd like to take a couple of minutes and talk about the perception by some that is shocking that I am a member of Portland City Council. Let me say, when I joined Portland City Council in January of 2019, I was the very first African-American woman to have that honor. And at that time, the Portland City Council for the very first time was majority women. So that was 3 years ago. Here we are in 2022. And today, the Portland City Council has 2 African-Americans, myself and an African-American male. We also have a Latinx woman. We have a gay white male. And we have the mayor, who is like the traditional city council person that you would expect to be on the Portland City Council. It has been my privilege to serve. And when you see me, it's clear that I am Black. I've always been Black. I always will be Black. And I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, which is a community that was 80% Black. And so I grew up and had a very strong foundation, very similar to what Wakaya talked about, is having a community that looked out for me. No matter where I went, somebody was, hey, baby, what you doing over here, right? How's your mom doing, right? What's going on with your brother? I had a community that was responsible for me. And at the time, right, I didn't think it was that cool, right? I just thought, who are these nosy people all in my business, right? But as an adult, I really understand how important it is for young people to have adults. And Maya Angelou used to say that when they see you, their eyes light up, right? You have people in your life that when they see you coming, they just go, oh, there's Nima. Hi, Nima. How are you? How are you doing? How's school, right? What have you done lately, right? Do you have people in your life like that? Yes. I mean, all of us deserve to have people in our life and not our family, right? Our family is going to love us because that's their job, is to love us, right? But all of us deserve to have people in our life that just say, oh, it's so good to see you. And their eyes light up. They're excited because they get to spend some time with you, right? That's my job as a city council member. When I talk to young people, and one of my favorite things to do is to talk to young people. I'll go to any school, I'll go anywhere. And Nima, it took us an extra year to get me here for this conference, but I'm here because of your persistence. And let me just say that I want you, when you walk into City Hall, to believe that those seats on that council are yours, right? Is we're just temporarily holding them until you get out of school, until you do the other stuff you want to do, but those are your seats. And for me, as the first African-American woman, every time I see a little child that comes in the city council chambers, I want them to know that this is your seat. I'm holding it. I'm just holding it for you. I have a question for the students who are on this call. I know you got questions for me, but since I'm talking, I guess I get to be first. Huh? And my question for you, what is the name on the clothing you're wearing? You look at your shoes, whose name is on your shoes? You look at that sweatshirt you're wearing, whose name is on that sweatshirt? And I ask you this question because when Rakaya talked about building wealth isn't what you buy. Building wealth is what you own. Think about that for a moment. I wore this sweatshirt today, and you probably can't see the whole thing. I'm gonna stand up a little bit. But it says, I am wearing Nora, what's the name here? I am wearing Nora today. Nora, I'm sorry, I can't even get the name right because I can't read it upside down. But my point is that this shirt, this sweatshirt that I'm wearing looks like any other sweatshirt. But two Black women designed this sweatshirt, right? They own the company that is mass producing these sweatshirts. So this sweatshirt for me, when I went out and bought a sweatshirt, I could have bought Nike. I could have Nike blazed across my chest, right? Like so many people do. But I don't own stock in Nike. And the people that own the stock, most of them don't look like me. I want to help these people have stock that I can buy, right? I wanted to ask you, look at your shoes. I want to tell you a story about a young woman I met recently, and her name is Nicole Rose. And Nicole Rose is an African-American woman born and bred in Portland. And she is a granddaughter of Benjamin and Mary Rose Dean. You may know Dean's Beauty and Barbershop with a 30+ year history of serving Portlanders. and providing beauty and barber needs in the community. But you may not know that this bad granddaughter who graduated from college and thought she was going to go into the beauty industry, she decided that she was actually going to create hair products, natural hair products, right? For hair like our hair, right? And she did. And when I had a conversation with this young woman, she's probably 20 something. I had a conversation with this young woman and found out that she was on her way to the Grammys to put her hair care products in the gift bags at the Grammys. So I tell you this story to say the only limit to your economic freedom is your thought process. That is the only limit that you have. And so that's where I wanted to start. But you had some very specific questions to me about reparations. And I loved Rakaya Adams' response to reparations question. And she's right. Reparation can look differently depending upon what harm is being repaired. My question around reparations, though, is who decides what's appropriate reparations for a society that has never valued Black lives? Who decides what's appropriate reparations for the generations of harm done by people who did not come to this country of their own free will, and have actually, until always there've been resistance to the status quo, the norm? That's my question. My question is, I don't want people that don't look like me deciding what appropriate reparations should look like. Should we have reparations? No question. And they should be a multitude of reparations. For example, college should be free for every Black and Native American child in America, period. It should be free. There should be no question about that. As I continue to work with the fabulous Rakaya Adams around this Albina Vision Trust vision of what Albina could be with the right public investments, my question becomes, how do we make sure that private developers don't come in and make a small fortune off of this redevelopment? Who owns it after the development is made, right? Who gets to enjoy the reimagined Albina community, and who owns it? Who owns all those beautiful buildings? Who's going to have the businesses on the waterfront? Who's going to be prioritized to ensure that it really is about reparations and undoing generations of harm? That's the question that I have. And reparations have to happen through every governmental institution that we have. So it's not just a check, a one-time check, because this is institutionalized. So whether you're talking education, whether you're talking business ownership, whether you're talking a political power, whatever we're, right? This is a collective thing that we have to do together. And I want to make sure that we are centering our voices in the conversation around reparations, right? That not someone else is somewhere in the little back room deciding, okay, if we do this, then all the racism of the last 200 years will go away, because we know it won't go away, right? So I am curious. Oh, I want to also say at City Council, there's an opportunity for young voices every single Wednesday morning at 9:30 a.m. And now that we're all on a Zoom live for a little while again, 9:30 a.m. is what's called communication slots. And there are 5 slots, and each person gets to talk about anything they want to for 3 minutes. I've seen groups of people take all 5 slots and tell a story and ask me and my colleagues for very specific things. I've seen it used well. So in 15 minutes, you could tell a really compelling story with 5 people with 3 minutes apart a piece. That's an opportunity to talk to all 5 of us at one time. And we have to listen because it's at the beginning of every city council meeting. So I would encourage you, think about what you want and need from Portland City Council and use those slots. Also, we're in the middle, starting our budget process again. There will be community budget forums. I would love to see students demanding a student budget forum that is focused on what are the needs of students in the city of Portland. What is the need of young people in the city of Portland, and how can the city help young people? Because we all say, right, that's what we're doing. We're all about young people, right? You could organize right now, because the budget forums will start in March, but right now, if you started a letter writing campaign, or you started coming to city council regularly and demanding that there be a young people budget forum, that the young people actually facilitate, and we as the old people, we get to sit and listen to what it is you need from us. I think that's something that you could do right now and have a huge impact on the budget vote that we're going to do in May. Because every time we pass a budget, everybody comes in and says, well, this is for the young people. This is for the kids in our community. This is for our future. But if your voice isn't there, then other people are speaking on your behalf. I loved when Dr. Copley talked about the gentleman that was unapologetically Black. That was one of his early mentors. I want to be that for young people today. And I can tell you, I can't go anywhere in the city of Portland, actually in Oregon, without people knowing exactly who I am. And is it because I am like special or something? No. But it is because when you look at me, I wear my culture proudly. And people know it's like what you see is what you get. I'm not trying to impress people. I'm not trying to be anybody other than who I am. And I was one of those kids in the classroom that was bored out of my mind because I was good. I read a lot. I was good. I finished my assignment long before a lot of other people would be. And I was bored out of my mind in school. So some of the tips that Dr. Renee Mitchell gave today, I'm going to use that in city council. So if you guys see me kind of grabbing my thumb at council, you'll know I'm trying to calm myself so that I don't say something in public that would be inappropriate. So thank you, Dr. Mitchell, for that. Are there questions for me, Nima?
Yes. Do you believe in reparations for descendants of those who were enslaved?
Yes. Yes. Oh, now somebody's got a deep question here. What did I just see? Could we advocate for monetary reparations and establish a sovereign nation with dual citizenship where we could police ourselves? Well, that's an interesting question because honestly, let me stop. Black people are a majority on the planet. It is only in the US that we talk about minority status. In fact, when I came to Oregon and people started talking about minorities, I didn't even know what they were talking about, right? Well, the minority population thinks this. Well, the Black population thinks this. Well, they talked to 2 Black people and they had a consensus of what Black people thought when I first moved here. So let me just say that, so yes, I don't want to be separated. I want to be able to go anywhere I want to go and do the business I want to do. I don't believe that I know that I would not have been successful had I chosen to only talk to Black people. Right? I would not be successful. I would have not been able to do the kind of things I've been able to do if I had an approach that because people aren't nice to me, I'm not going to talk to anybody that doesn't look like me, right? Even growing up in Baltimore, where the population was 80% Black, I had to interact with other cultures. So for me personally, that's my perspective. Other people may have different opinions about that, but I would not want to create a separate environment because I'm a world traveler. And when I travel the world, people love my dreads. They love my Black complexion and they ask lots of questions, right? I do think that we should get monetary reparations, but I think we can't stop at monetary reparations. I think we have to think very systemically because racism is systemic, right? A check won't fix racism in the United States of America. It is embedded in every system and institution we have. And so again, which is why I say, I don't want other people deciding what reparations looks like. I want us to be the ones that actually come up with a comprehensive plan about how actually we prepare the harm that's been done for generations. Next question.
There looks like there's another question in the chat. It says, what do you think reparations look like?
Well, I mean, again, I think reparations would look like a free college education across the board for any descendant of people who were brought here unwillingly as slaves. And for Native Americans. I mean, we got to remember that Native Americans, we took their land and then made us work for free on land that was stolen from Native Americans. And so I see the two interconnectedly because both of our communities continue to be harmed by the systems that were created and not created for us. And so education, potentially land trust, where you pay a minimum amount of rent or mortgage payment, right? But the land is owned by Black descendants who have experienced generations of discrimination. I am E102. Sorry about that. My food order was coming. Next question.
Yeah, I have a question. How can the Civic Life Office contribute and how can we help?
I don't see the Office of Civic and Community Life, which exists to engage community members in the civic life of the city of Portland, right? That's why we have the Office of Civic and Community Life, and it's in my portfolio. And so I don't think a office will actually be able to help with reparations. First, it's a federal issue. The federal government has to actually be the one that actually does the big picture legislation. And then I think there has to be state rules written about how that would be implemented in the state of Oregon. And then in the city of Portland, there may be additional compensations, right? And that's why I say, when I think about the monetary one, I think about the federal government being responsible for what does that monetary one look like, right? I see the city of Portland being responsible. How do we make sure that we're building a land trust that that descendants of slavery will benefit from continuously, ongoing, right? So it would not stop. And it can't stop with just my generation or your generation. It has to be something that would be ongoing. It would be a legacy of the United States of America.
Looks like there's one more question. How do you think we could attempt change in some of those laws or rules that put Black and brown people at a distance?
What a great question. And let me say that we are really starting to do that. In 2020, after George Floyd was murdered by police in Minneapolis, we here had over 100+ days of people taking to the street protesting. What I realized in that 100 days, because I'd never seen anything like that in my life, and I'm a child of the civil rights movement, right? So when all of a sudden there's a worldwide movement demanding justice from police violence for Black people, it was phenomenal. So as your city and city council member, there are some people that thought that I just overnight dreamed up a ballot measure to create the first of its kind, truly independent police oversight board that would have a budget, it would have subpoena power, it would have the power to discipline and the power to fire officers. The very first one, sent it to the voters. I had my city council colleagues, we unanimously sent it to voters, and 82% of voters passed it, overwhelmingly, right? They have now had their second meeting. It is called the Rethink Commission. That commission has 18 months to develop the oversight board. How many people should be on it? What is the demographic makeup? What are the ages of people on the board? How often should they meet? What's their staffing looks like, right? So there's a commission right now that young voices should be weighing into that are going to have a huge impact on how policing happens in the future in the city of Portland. So they have 18 months, so we're about 2 years away. But in that time, we'll have a truth and reconciliation process, which is vital to regaining community trust of policing. The police have work they have to do inside the police bureau first. And then we get as a community to decide, how do we want to be policed in the future? So for example, I don't know about you, but I'd much rather have a police officer live down the street from me than one that lives out in the country and is unfamiliar with how Black folks just hang out, right? I want somebody who actually wants to protect and serve me, right? And does not see me as the enemy. How do we do that? We recruit and grow our own, right? Right now, we should be going to high schools in the summertime, creating summer employment opportunities for fire, Portland Fire and Rescue, for Portland Police Bureau, for 911. I have a fire bureau today that is 93% men in 2022. Some of the best firefighters I have are women. It took me to promote Chief Sarah Boone to fire chief, even though before I met her, she had 24 years as a firefighter, but because she was a Black woman, no one before I got to City Hall ever considered that she might be an excellent fire chief. So that was a long way to say there are no quick answers to fixing what have been systemic problems for generations, but we are on a track with clear policy directions, with voter support to fundamentally change who has the privilege to become a police officer, who has the privilege to protect and serve us all, and what does community safety look like? Because community safety is just not how many weapons you have on the street. Community safety is having green spaces in your neighborhood, having car-free spaces in your neighborhood, having convening community meeting spaces where community members get to know each other. We are all safer because we know who's in our neighborhood. That's what keeps us safe. Armed people don't keep us safe, and especially armed people who see us as an enemy.
I don't see any more questions. So.
Well, let me just say that I am so honored to have been invited to speak at this conference today. The work that you've done over the years in putting this conference on, providing education opportunities for young folks is really inspiring. And I will tell you, Dr. Coakley said this earlier, you never know who's watching you. You never know who's looking at you thinking, wow, Nima is so good at facilitating stuff. Man, I want to be like Nima because she just gets right to the issue. She actually speaks her truth. You never know who's watching and who's learning from you. And each of you have your own unique skills and abilities. And I say, be true to who you are. Trust your gut and trust those adults whose eyes light up when you walk into a room, because they are there to make sure that you are successful, and they are there to help lift you up when the world gets tough, because it does get tough some days. And yes, that whole be true to who you are, trust that gut. I got to tell you, I would have never made it to be this old if I didn't trust my gut. And there are days that people will be telling you, no, 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 you got to do this. You got to do this. You trust that inner voice, because that inner voice will always guide you in the right direction. I hope I get to see all of you at a city council meeting soon, at a budget hearing soon. Your voices are vital. Oh, one more thing that Dr. Mitchell didn't mention today. One of the other things that I was able to do as a Portland City Commissioner during the height of the protests in 2020 was to develop a program, an African-American youth leadership program. This program will be, Dr. Mitchell is going to lead this program, and you know how bad she is already, right? But she's going to lead this program. My goal was to have $1 million set aside every year that would be controlled by young people, by Black young people. And we're going to launch this program early this year. And I want you to be on the lookout for that program, because what that program will do is both help our kids heal and also help them soar. And so again, thank you for inviting me today. If there aren't any more questions. And let me say, you are an excellent timekeeper, Nima. I have been at conferences with adults that, oh my gosh, they just drag on. You have done a phenomenal job of keeping us on task and on time. I applaud you for that. That is hard work.
Thank you. Shout out to all the speakers. You guys were amazing, and I definitely learned a lot today. Thank you to Dr. Coakley, Commissioner Hardesty, Ms. Adams, and Renee Mitchell. Hope everyone has an amazing rest of their day. And this was very powerful. And yeah, I think we can all just leave.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Happy Dr. King Day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah, happy Martin Luther King Day.